Hello to all Cinemaster lovers. Hope you enjoy watching. Let's get started.
The United Parties of the West trust not the star in their wars.
The film begins in a remote place. Marco and his father depend on each other to live in a forest far from the noise of the world. They survive by hunting. At a young age, Marco learned to assemble and disassemble weapons with his father. His father was a man of few words. Every day, alongside hunting, he would set traps around the house. Because Marco was young, he couldn't participate in these activities, making his childhood very boring. The father taught Marco that a good hunter must remain silent in the forest to blend with the trees. This helped protect them from the dangers outside. His father had strong faith in the power of nature and left a candle mark in the shape of the letter M on Marco's wrist. The M symbolized moss, or mist or magic, and represented Marco's belonging to this forest. But Marco himself wanted to see the world outside the forest. However, his father always said he was too weak. If he left now, he wouldn't survive. But one day, the paper child would become strong, and the forest would release him to find his fairy. This fragmented speech came from a comic book called The Paper Child. The book also mentioned that the fairy had left the forest long ago and had gone to a distant and mysterious place called the Valley of Stone. Before the paper child grows strong, he must stay in the forest to complete his education so the magical forest can protect him from evil winds. Later, we learn that Marco couldn't defy his father's arrangements yet. At his young age, he deeply wished to find friends and play with them. One day, Marco discovered an abandoned trailer deep in the forest. Through the window, he saw toys on a table. He couldn't resist entering it. As he played with the toys joyfully, someone appeared behind the trailer. Marco shrank into a corner. The person in the shadows approached slowly. This person also looked like a young boy, holding a toy and trying to befriend Marco. Marco taught the boy how to listen to music. The two quickly became good friends. They introduced themselves and found that both their names started with the letter M. One was named Marco, and the other was Mo. Mo seemed not to interact much with people, and his language skills had deteriorated slightly. He could only say one word at a time, but that didn't stop Marco from liking him. However, staying away from home for too long made his father angry. Marco took the toy Mo gave him and prepared to leave. A woman appeared with a rifle. Gradually, the tension eased. Marco immediately sensed danger and hid in the nearby trees. The woman clearly wouldn't shoot a child and seemed to recognize that Marco and his father lived in the forest. This woman was likely Mo's mother. She threw a bag of nuts to Marco and quickly returned to the trailer to hug her son. Marco watched the scene from the darkness. He was afraid to take the gift he received home. So Marco found a place to hide the toy. He returned with the nuts and a bottle of water, but his father was very angry. When Marco returned, his father asked him where he had gone alone, without fetching water from the river. Marco trembled with fear. The nuts in his pocket fell to the ground. His father assumed he had gone to collect nuts, so he didn't continue questioning him. Marco remembered the hug between the woman and Mo. Because of this, he approached his father to hug him. But his father pushed him away angrily and went back to chopping the pile of wood nearby. At night, Marco opened the picture book and quietly drew his new friend inside it. The next day, he took the opportunity to retrieve the toy while fetching water and continued playing with Mo. Mo's mother gave him a different feeling of love compared to his father. In fact, there was a picture of a woman in his father's workshop. One day, Marco gathered his courage and asked him about her. His father didn't answer Marco's question, but late at night, he went to sit alone in the forest. Perhaps he was reflecting on his grief because of his son's words. The next day, the father and son went hunting in the forest as usual. Suddenly, they heard the sound of an explosion not far away. As soon as the father heard it, he told his son to return home first. Then the father left to investigate, holding his rifle. Marco didn't obey and didn't leave. He circled the area and hid among the trees to spy. Mo's mother was covered in blood and holding her arm. There were 2 or 3 corpses lying on the ground. The father approached Mo's mother with his gun without hesitation and shot her in the head. Marco was shocked and ran back home quickly. He lay in bed, his mind racing and almost driving him mad. As the night deepened, his father finally returned, muttering incomprehensible words repeatedly and carelessly throwing things around. Marco put on his headphones and turned up the volume. He didn't want to hear his father's voice, which was driving him crazy. The unclear words mixed with the sound of falling objects kept coming through. Marco curled up, wishing his father would sleep. Later, Marco sneaked out of bed, opened the cupboard his father always kept locked, and took out the tablet inside. Marco remembered that whenever his father was upset, he would take out this device to watch it. There was a video of him, his father, and a woman playing together on the grass. The woman's belly was round, indicating the family was about to welcome a new member. Then the image became unclear. The woman appeared very anxious and called Marco's name through the screen. The woman in the picture, her name was Irina, and she was Marco's mother. Afterward, Marco tied his sleeping father to a metal pipe, gathered his belongings, and left the house before dawn. Marco went to the trailer to find Mo. He quickly packed many cans into his bag. Mo kept asking where his mother went. Marco lied and said, "Your mother went hunting?" Then he held Mo's hand, and they ran together. But halfway, Mo refused to move further. By then, the father had woken up, freed himself from the metal pipe, and noticed all the guns and picture books in the cupboard were missing. The father grabbed his hunting rifle and went out, following the tracks on the ground until he reached the trailer. But Marco and Mo had already left. Only a picture of Mo and his mother remained on the table. The father searched everywhere for Marco anxiously. The two children kept moving forward until they saw a strange person on the road. They hid among the trees and then fled the path at the edge of the forest. Not far away, there was an abandoned car. The two quickly climbed inside and locked the door. In the next moment, a group of zombies surrounded them, banging on the windows. Mo was terrified by the noise. Marco couldn't do anything. However, they covered his ears with his hands. Unexpectedly and in a very short time, the zombies fell to the ground and couldn't get up. The father forced the car door open. He was holding an axe, his hand stained with blood. He quickly pulled Marco out in one swift move. He carefully checked to ensure his son wasn't injured. Luckily, it was just a false alarm. The father glanced at Mo and forcefully shut the car door. Then he pulled Marco aside. Marco stubbornly refused to move, so the father had to hide him behind a large tree. He took his gun and went back to save Mo. He was an excellent marksman who never missed a shot. While Marco watched intently, he noticed a zombie approaching from behind. He grabbed the gun, aimed carefully, and pulled the trigger. The father was startled by the sound of gunfire. He was about to return to save them, but a zombie attacked him on the side of the road. Luckily, the father acted quickly and killed the zombie. By the time he returned to the spot, the black-clad zombie had already been shot and killed by Marco. The father patted his frightened son and said, "Your friend is safe now. Let's leave this place quickly." He noticed blood on his arm. The father's face showed shock as he quickly stepped back. He tied himself to a nearby tree. It was clear he was afraid of losing his mind if he got infected, which could make him harm his son. In addition, the father explained to Marco what had happened to Mo's father. With tears, he admitted he had lost his mind when infected, which made him a threat to his own son. The father also explained to Marco what had happened to Mo's mother. He told him she had been bitten by a zombie and was about to turn and harm those around her, so he had to deal with her himself. Marco finally believed his father and forgave him. The father wished he could hug his son one last time, but he was on the verge of losing his mind and turning into a monster driven by hunting instincts. The father pushed Marco away and encouraged him to leave quickly. Then, he let out a terrifying sound. Marco watched his father convulsing and groaning, unable to do anything but cry. He then left the forest, holding Mo's hand, and continued on the path. After a while, they heard gunfire behind them. Marco knew what it meant. He had lost his father forever that day, and his shield of protection. The story of the paper child was a fairy tale his father had created in a post-apocalyptic world. It was a haven that shielded them from harsh realities. But now, the magical forest was losing its enchantment. The paper child had to be strong. Marco then took Mo and moved forward. Fortunately, they could still keep each other company and not feel alone while being alone. After a short while, the two finally reached the edge of the forest. A new and unknown adventure awaited them ahead. The two boys walked along the tracks and moved forward. They met a man listening to a radio. The man spoke awkwardly, saying he wished he could go with them, but he had little ones at home he couldn't leave behind. While talking, he gestured for to greet them. In a nearby cage, there were some small zombies locked up. The man couldn't bear to part with his infected family, so he kept them confined. He brought out some food to treat Marco and Mo kindly, then watched them leave. But the peaceful and healing atmosphere didn't last long. While the two were searching for a place to spend the night, they discovered a large group of zombies. Fortunately, they were trapped inside a train car and couldn't get out. Marco quickly pulled Mo to escape, but as they turned, their path was blocked by two armed men. Luckily, they were just kids. The two men cornered Marco and Mo in a car and took them to a nearby refugee camp. The camp leader ordered the boys to be separated and imprisoned. This leader spoke with depravity, saying that after the apocalypse virus spread, all children born would be infected, and healthy children like Marco and Mo were rare and more valuable than gold. Especially Mo, considered a child with a weak performance, representing pure innocence, and who would never age. The leader wanted to keep Mo as a spiritual symbol for the refugee camp. As for Marco, keeping him would be a waste of resources, so he ordered his men to get rid of Marco the next day. Later, a kind, bearded man saw Marco alone outside with the weak child, who wasn't even his relative. He was truly impressed by the boy, so before dawn, he called Marco to wake him and help him escape through the back gate. Marco didn't listen to the man. He risked his life to sneak back into the camp and escape with Mo. The bearded man was then shot by the leader for his negligence. Mo complained of thirst midway through their escape. He was like a small child, unable to care for himself. Marco spoke harshly but was still forced to find water. Marco entered a nearby abandoned building to search for any reusable resources. He was surprised to find clean water and some clothes left behind by refugees. Marco leaned on the balcony to look outside and saw a zombie mother with 2 zombie children. She seemed to be nursing the children. He was curious about the scene when suddenly he heard Mo screaming. The refugee camp leader was actually chasing them. The leader, furious about their escape, drew his gun, ready to kill Mo first. Suddenly, a drone hovered above them. They immediately became alert and scanned their surroundings. But the next moment, gunfire broke out. One of the leader's men was shot and fell to the ground. 2 fully armed soldiers approached, shooting the refugee camp leader on the spot. Marco hid in the darkness, and only Mo saw him and nodded gently, signaling Marco not to come closer. But he accidentally made a sound. A soldier approached where Marco was hiding. Mo grabbed the gun from the ground and sacrificed himself to distract the soldier who was about to find Marco. The man who fired the shot was momentarily shocked. He had never thought of harming a child. He acted purely out of self-preservation. The 2 soldiers left, dragging their helmets behind them. Marco felt his heart breaking as he moved forward alone. This time he was truly alone. Marco felt he might never find the Stone Valley. In anger, he tore apart his book, The Paper Child. He was filled with rage and didn't know who to direct it at. Marco stood on the hillside and looked into the distance. A forest of steel and concrete loomed ominously. He gathered his courage and entered the city. Outside, hungry zombies stood at the security tracks, moving in groups. Marco could do nothing but hide under a car and wait for the crowd to pass. The next day, he found a nearby hospital. There was no sign of life inside. While Marco felt lost, he suddenly saw a woman in a white dress standing in a patient's room. Could she be the legendary White Fairy? Marco took the woman's cold hand and leaned, exhausted, on her frail shoulder. The woman held Marco and comforted him. She wasn't a fairy at all. She was just a patient infected with the zombie virus. Marco quickly fled the hallway and braced the hallway door with a stick as he walked. As he was walking, he touched the woman's hand through the glass. Marco was completely exhausted. He wanted to collapse in his mother's embrace like any normal child. Marco kept wandering the streets. He passed by a wall full of posters of missing people. He left a picture of his mother on the wall. At that moment, a broadcast started from a nearby building. Marco followed the sound and went inside to see what was happening. He found a holographic man sitting and talking. He was speaking in a language Marco didn't understand. The loud sound attracted the nearby zombies. The voice was saying, "We must protect our children." As the zombies closed in, Marco couldn't hold himself back and ran towards them. Marco prayed sincerely amidst the music. Bullets flew around him. All the zombies around him fell. Marco removed his headphones, and everything became silent. The red dot of a sniper rifle focused on the dinosaur t-shirt he was wearing. But suddenly, the fairy who saved Marco stood under the bright sunlight. It was clear that she was warmer than the sunlight itself. But she wasn't a fairy at all. She was a woman with the rank of lieutenant. She removed her mask, and she told Marco, "You look exactly like my son, Philip." As soon as she said that, Marco clenched the hand that had been bitten by the zombie. The lieutenant tightened her grip on her weapon. She had to act before the child turned into a zombie. But suddenly, Marco stepped forward, hugged the lieutenant, and wiped her tears. In the end, the lieutenant couldn't bear it and chose to lower her weapon. She lifted Marco's bitten hand and saw a mark shaped like the letter M on it. Marco. The woman was shocked by the mark. She removed her helmet and gave him her coordinates. She said, astonished, "This child has a mark." She looked at him and said, "You're coming with me." And we learned that the unique mark on Marco's body was likely the reason he was one of the post-apocalypse children who didn't get infected. He was probably one of the few people with antibodies. And so, the movie ends on an open note. See you again in a new summary. Thank you for watching. If you liked today's video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to receive all new updates. See you in the next video. Goodbye.